All right, welcome everyone to the monthly DNA Decoded Genetics Program coaching call. Thank you all for being here today. And I'm going to introduce Dr. Sam. A few of you already know him, but if you haven't met him, here's Dr. Sam. He's an awesome functional medicine doctor, and he brings a lot of humor and fun to all of our discussions. So looking forward to hearing what he has to share today. And my name is Crystal. I've been a health coach for over 10 years, and I've been working with Dr. Sam for about 2 years now. And I'm in Connecticut. I homestead, I homeschool, and I'm passionate about helping others restore harmony and balance in their life in all of the ways. So, Dr. Sam, today we're talking about mood from a few different lenses as far as genetics is concerned. So, we have the MAOA gene, the COMT gene, and then we're also going to be talking about caffeine, um, carbs, vitamin D utilization, etc. So, why don't you start with talking about why some people stay calm while others feel one minor inconvenience away from a total meltdown in terms of genetics.
So with genetics and mood, there's a lot that goes into genetics and mood. It would be very simple to say that, oh, here's this one gene that's going to affect everything. And even here it says the MAOA gene when the reality is that there's multiple genes that go into this. If we're going to approach mood like it's one gene that controls your mood, that's very much the same as the pharmaceutical philosophy. It's like, oh, you're just one drug away from solving this issue, as opposed to really seeing all the complexities that are involved. MAOA is one of those really key genes, but its emphasis is just on one of them. Basically, we've got neurotransmitters in our brain. Neurotransmitters are um, they're modified amino acids that act as signaling molecules. So like serotonin, the root amino acid to that is tryptophan, and dopamine, the root of that is tyrosine, which is almost also the same amino acid that's used to make thyroid hormone. It's not thyroid hormone, it's just the same backbone that's used to make it. And same thing with epinephrine. So what happens is that you've got people who have the, there's basically two parts to making these neurochemicals that influence your mood. Making of the neurotransmitter and then breaking it down. So there's people who have different bottlenecks where they've got a gene that rapidly makes it and rapidly gets rid of it. They rapidly make it and have a hard time getting rid of it. They don't make it very quickly, but it rapidly gets depleted. They don't make it very quickly, but it's very slow to be gotten rid of. So you've got these different scenarios that your genes determine how fast or how slow you make or remove these neurotransmitters. Now, if that sounds complicated, because it is, and don't feel bad that if it's, I'm going to show you some like charts and stuff. It is complicated, but we're going to try to make it as easy to understand as possible. So we've got, we've got our second janitor has made the scenes in our Fitchine's genetic blueprint. The first janitor was Mr. Sod. He was the janitor that cleans up the free radicals in the mitochondria. We've got this new janitor, MAOA, where he's part of the process of removing removing the excess neurotransmitters. And if you think about it, uh, if we go to the next slide, this may this slide is both simplifies and is also complicated. And I borrowed this slide from Seeking Health. There's the reference for it. And the thing about it is that even this is a bit simplified because in our genetics report here, there's actually two MAOA genes. Most people only talk about one of them when there's actually two of them. So we're now dealing with three different variables here. And I think the easiest way to understand it is if you look at the different situations people find themselves in. So if you've got a slow if you've got a constant buildup of these excitatory neurotransmitters, then there's difficulty falling asleep. You're startled, you're irritable, workaholic, trouble relaxing. These are people that go, 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 go. So if you've got a red or yellow dot in your COMT gene, which is the other gene related to this whole mood cascade, then that means it's slower. It means you're more likely to be on the hyper excitatory. So like I have a yellow dot in COMT. So this means that that enzyme doesn't break down the dopamine, the serotonin, the cortisol, like it's just the chemicals for just being like is just on. So I'm very easily startled. My senior they called it a senior project, but effectively my senior thesis was on anger. Believe it or not, most people don't realize that I've had a very long history dealing with anger. And I mean, if people know about my life history, I have plenty of reasons to be angry. But I did a full cross-cultural, anthropological, neurological, and biochemical analysis of the emotion of anger. And philosophical. I went into it was a whole massive spreadsheet of understanding anger from all sorts of different angles. But the neurological was that if you just have an extra buildup of all of these hyperactivating neurochemicals, well, what is anger? It's a state of hyperactivation. Whereas people who don't have these, they can get more depressive. They're more kind of not as activated. Workaholic, I can vouch for that. Trouble relaxing, I can vouch for that. So there's just this overall there's an overall propensity if you just aren't able to break down these neurotransmitters and they just kind of stay constantly activating and turning on the light switches in your brain. And it may seem like, well, how this doesn't make sense. Why would slow make it more active? It's referring to the ability, the enzyme to get rid of these activating chemicals is slow. So they're just building up, and it's hard to get rid of them. The trash chute is much slower to get rid of them. So a slow enzyme means more neurological activity because the enzyme to get rid of it is the one that's slow. It can't get rid of it. And on the flip side, you've got the people who burn through neurotransmitters very fast, so they have difficulty staying asleep, lower energy, moody, struggle to focus, and not terribly motivated. Now, it gets tricky when there's um, some combination mismatches in the sense that some people have a make like it's not everyone is just cleanly one of these combinations or the other. I'm not this way. I have a yellow dot in COMT and green dots in both MAOA and MAOA2. So on balance, I'm more I'm more here, but I certainly can have periods where I struggle to focus and have motivation issues. So, uh, but the answer, fortunately, the answer that works in all the what I found when I was researching how do you help both MAOA1 and MAOA2, the single most common thing that helps both, because what happens with other genetics tests is that they only talk about one or the other, and unfortunately, there's certain recommendations that can help one but mess up the other. So my job was to find out what are the things that can help both MAOA1 and MAOA2. And because if you go to the next slide, so this is an example of someone with green and red and so like and there's a lot of text on here because a lot of people when they read their MAOA genes they read oh my God I'm at a risk of addiction and worsening response to other conditions and drug and like they read these as absolutes and they're not absolutes, they're just tendencies. Genetics is about tendencies. And so my job was to figure out what are the recommendations that are going to help the combination of MAOA1 and MAOA2 that are not gonna be counterproductive for the other. And the answer for the answer for all of those combinations, green, red, green, green, red, red, for all of them, it may sound cliche, is exercise and stress management, which is uh, for some people who are really looking for a magic bullet, well, I just want to find the one thing that's going to help my mood. Exercise and stress management. Well, everyone knows that. Great, then do it. It's it's the mood genes are so complex that if you try to find, yes, there are certain supplements that can help one, but they can also harm the other. There is one combination where like quercetin is going to be help benign for the other, like helpful for one and benign for this. So that one's added in for a specific combination. But the good news, bad news is that no matter what your gene combo is, healthy exercise and stress management is going to help all of these genes. Now, for those of you that came on here to say like, look, I want to find out how to help my mood, what's the one magic bullet? And now you're being told now it's exercise and stress management and you're feeling disappointed. I get it. I was there too. But this is the complexity of finding recommendations that aren't counterproductive in other ways. And so when we come back to exercise and stress management, unfortunately, with the 15 Genetic Blueprint, you have an entire section on how to optimize your exercise and recovery. So if you want to know how to best optimize your exercise and your recovery, you've got an entire section in your genetics profile that goes over that. In terms of stress management, uh, so there's a lot that goes into stress management. Um, there's I recommend things like if you're dealing with stressful thoughts that completely bounce around your head and keep pinging around and they're kind of repetitive, looping thoughts, I recommend something called The Work of Byron Katie. Uh, I'll just put that on the website, thework.com. There's a $5 app. There's a free helpline for people to work through specific stressful belief systems. Basically, you identify a stressful thought, and then there's a system of 4 questions where you ask of that stressful thought and then do what's called a turnaround. I've got YouTube videos on this if people want more detail from my lens, but thework.com is a great resource. Uh, if you want to deal with stress management, you'd have morning and evening routines because routines calm the nervous system in general. There's looking at your sleep hygiene. Crystal and I are working with one gentleman whose lead domino is his terrible sleep habits. And his mood is all over the place, and it's leading to addictive tendencies on his part. And it is the lead domino. So like our primary focus with him is not managing his stress that's leading to his addictive tendencies and all the other issues he's creating. It's the fact that his cycle is so awful and so out of balance that it's affecting everything else. Now, when I speak about him, I speak from deep, I'm not saying this I'm speaking from a place of compassion because I was a crippled insomniac growing up. I had horrific insomnia. I also had a video game addiction, like this gentleman, and I was up till 2, 3 a.m. for years. Like, I get it. So I'm talking from a place of deep experience. And I know from the massive sleep deprivation, it 100% affected my mood in a negative way. So sometimes the best way to deal with mood is not to go after the mood, it's to go after the the other peripheral lifestyle behaviors that you can change, and your mood will change as a consequence. I have an entire ebook draft on sleep because it's just such a just to tackle this one topic. And of course, sleep will help. It's like exercise. I mean, I would have put recommendation, exercise, sleep, and also sleep hygiene on here. So other things that can help with mood is regular eating, as opposed to eating it at random times that are different from day to day. That will help a lot. Um, Also, believe it or not, managing clutter in your environment. Visual stress is a form of stress. And if you live, if you ha I mean, the Eastern traditions call it feng shui, and they assign all sorts of esoteric implications to how you arrange things in a specific way. But from the Western mind, it's like just if you have a tidy, clean environment, then there's less stress, therefore your life is going to go better. The number one thing today that be helpful to manage stress is to cut social media and news consumption. I do not care what political stripe you are. Do not care. The recommendation is the same. Reduce the volume. Just reduce it, and you will be less stressed no matter what your political persuasion. And I'm deeply uninterested in talking about any specific political persuasion because the recommendation is uniform across all parties. So there's many practical ways that you can improve how you handle stress that will by itself have an epigenetic shift in how your neurotransmitters balance. Then there's other things, other influences on your mood. Chris, we can go to the next slide. Okay, inflammation. So, how many people here have heard of the inflamed brain? You can just raise your hand. All right, so the having an inflamed brain will cause mood issues. Now, I had to deal with this um because was living in a moldy apartment and my mood got real bad. It got super dark at places. And what was happening is that the mold was creating chronic inflammation in my brain and affecting my mood. And it's people have this experience of when they leave a place that's moldy and they know they're sensitive to mold and they know then they leave and they just start feeling better. There's even a fascinating speculation that the cultural phenomenon of a haunted house is actually like all these people start acting super weird. Some people have nightmares. You can actually track that to mold poisoning and mold sensitivity. That these haunted houses, what are they? Old, musty, moldy buildings. And about 10% of the population genetically, when they're exposed to mold, have nightmares. And then people like me, when I'm exposed to mold, I don't have nightmares. I just get real moody. And so you have people who are, quote, possessed when they walk into a haunted house. From a Western science mind, it's like, is it possession or is your mold on the brain affecting your mood and your dreams? I go with the latter. So, inflammation and the route to this is inflammation. So, the other things that can cause inflammation in the brain are really bad diet. Things like seed oils or rancid oils or lots of processed food. And there was uh, the grandmother of functional toxicology, which is a fancy way of saying the woman who really spearheaded the movement to remove toxic chemical exposure to children was I'm trying not to get emotional when I think about her because she's just done so much for us in the field. Dr. Doris Rapp, RAPP. Dr. Doris Rapp, she is an absolute legend for people that remember her because she was the one who she I remember very distinctly watching a video, and I'll never forget this. It's haunted me ever since I've seen it. She went in, she took videos in the school, her local school, and there was this child of the school, this fourth grader, just normal fourth grader, sat at a desk, and the video was right on this child. And this kid, he's just sitting there at the desk, just, just kind of humming to himself, not just whatever, nothing, just nothing, just kind of a happy, normal kid. Doris took a cup of the floor polish that's used in the school, put it in front of him, and just asked him to sniff it. Just sniff it. And this kid sniffed it, and in real time, this is what happened. And just flew into a rage and literally threw himself against the wall and started hitting the wall. Like he completely jackaled. He went visibly, certifiably insane, violently insane, just from smelling we got some sound in the background, Helen. I think it might be you. Can some everyone, Crystal? Can we mute all? How do we mute all? Okay, there we go. Um, so this child completely jeckled in an instant. And what Doris Rapp was demonstrating is how toxic chemicals affect mood, sometimes instantaneously, sometimes violently. And that image of that video has haunted me for years. And I can only imagine, my senior thesis was on anger. And I know how worse I get mood-wise if I eat really unhealthy food and if I'm in an unhealthy environment. And I can only imagine how many of these chemicals were influencing my state of mind going through the public school system, and going through just it doesn't even matter if it's public school system. I went through I had private school in grade school and then a public school in high school. There was just these cleaning chemicals everywhere. So if you are concerned about your mood, then looking at all the different sources for inflammation, and this could also include things like histamine. So a good number of people who do their genetics tests are sensitive and vulnerable to histamine-based foods. Things like, unfortunately, avocados and chocolate and ground meats and old foods and fermented foods. And like there's an entire there's a link on page 6 of your reports that has a link to an antihistamine diet. And there's also the antihistamine slide, which is uh, do, 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 slide number do, do, slide number
Okay.
28. Slide number 28 is the slide that shows yeah, that thank you, Crystal. This is the one page quick summary of all the foods. The red, orange, and yellow, those are three different categories of how histamine increases in your body. And some of these foods cross over into multiple, like alcohol, both has is a high histamine containing food, but also blocks the enzyme that breaks down histamine, so histamine can't be gotten rid of. So people that are you tell me if you're more prone to headaches, itchy skin, fatigue, digestive issues, water weight, you think your mood's going to be ideal in those states? No. So you can see how an inflammation and even other pathways like histamine can create um can create bad mood. I mean, and then alcohol by itself can affect people's moods in interesting ways. So Crystal, we can go back to thank you. The next one is for mood is caffeine. This one's very personal to me because I had a coffee habit. This is true starting at age 6, and that was because I had such severe insomnia from um the violence at school and the gaslighting at home. And I couldn't sleep. And so then on top of that, you add on my particular issues with my mood genes. You add on top of that hyperinflammatory diet that my psychiatrist parents were feeding me because psychiatrists didn't know, arguably still don't know about lifestyle and diet. And I was put on a low-fat diet when I was 7 years old because my shrink parents thought my cholesterol was too high at age 7. So I was put on a high carb, low fat diet, which was exactly opposite of what I needed because I actually have a carb tolerance choice of 2, the second lowest carb tolerance you can have. And I was and lots of toxic foods, SpaghettiOs, breakfast cereals, um, fast food, candy, etc. So I had all of these pro-inflammatory things going on in my world, not and also the violence left injuries, which also caused its own inflammation. And then so I was relying on caffeine to keep me awake. And if I didn't, in I remember in grade school, I would lie to my teachers to say I felt sick in the afternoon just so I could go to the nurse's office to take a nap because I was so exhausted. And so I was taking caffeine. And the problem was that caffeine I have the genes, I have a red dots for caffeine-induced anxiety and depression. So caffeine-induced anxiety and depression is basically if you can't get rid of caffeine fast enough, it sticks around too long and too strong, and you get anxious and become jittery. That's the anxiety. And yeah, this is the slide. This is the one-page slide, page 26 in your reports that go over caffeine. As you can see, that the three major variables are timing, amount, and quality on the left-hand column there. And some people, they're so sensitive, like I am, to the amount that it can really screw me up. So I was drinking caffeine and I thought I was getting energy, but really I was having just massive anxiety, which I conflated as energy. So, uh, and then I'd have this drop afterwards, which would lead to depression. So your mood is not strictly dictated by, um, it's not strictly dictated by your MAOA1 gene, MAOA genes. There's other influences like inflammation, like caffeine, and also vitamin D. Now, one of the vitamin D, I mean, we could spend a very long time just on vitamin D, but everyone's heard of seasonal affective disorder or SAD, probably one of the most clever medical acronyms that's ever been made, SAD, seasonal affective disorder. And what it's talking about is that vitamin D deficiency absolutely affects mood. This is incredibly well studied across cultures, across the world, across time. And interestingly, one of the most important things that vitamin D actually does is not bone density. It does that, but it's not the most important thing that it does. Vitamin D affects every cell in the body, meaning has a receptor to grab vitamin D and use it. Every cell except red blood cells and dead skin cells has vitamin D receptors. But the most important thing vitamin D does is that it controls inflammation in your immune system. So here we have another connection back to inflammation. Now, for me, unfortunately, I have a double red in my VDR receptors, meaning the genes that make the docking sites for your cells to use vitamin D. So you can now start to see the picture of why I was so physically unwell and also mentally dealing with anxiety and depression growing up. It was because I also had problems using vitamin D, where I couldn't actually reap all the benefits from vitamin D, even if on the occasion I had foods that had vitamin D in it. So, uh, vitamin D is really, really critical. And if you've got the red and yellow dots in your VDR receptors in your genetics, thank you. Yeah, that's page 50. No, that's sorry. Page 50 is synthesis. So page 51 is how well can you actually use the vitamin D. And if you have trouble, if you have a red or yellow dot here, this is where it's important to avoid smoking, avoid air pollution, and to take sulforaphane. That's that broccoli sprout extract. Sulforaphane is one of the precious few things that increases the vitamin D receptors in your body. Crystal, if you go back up to page 50 to go to the synthesis. So synthesis, now obviously you need vitamin D plus the receptors in order to use it. So having vitamin D is very important, but the part most people miss is the receptors to actually receive it. So there's about a half dozen genes between sunlight and vitamin D ending up in your bloodstream. Some people don't, those six genes are not ideal. And so there's some problems actually synthesizing vitamin D from sunlight. And uh, so some people do need to also take vitamin D. Vitamin D is very easy to try as a blood test. And the things you're looking for is there's the normal range, which there's a difference between Western medical normals and the functional optimals. The in Western medicine, the air quotes normals can range from 30 to 100 nanograms per milliliter, or worse, the quote some experts say between 20 and 40, which is low. The functional optimal, so we've got medical normal, which is this big bell curve, and then we got functional optimal, which is a much smaller range. The optimal you want to be in is between 60 and 80 nanograms per milliliter. And the if you're not there, that's where you should be taking vitamin D, increasing vitamin D in order to get it to that 60 to 80 range. And so the peeps, one person asked me, okay, so what if I do have red and yellow dots of my if I do have red and yellow dots in my vitamin D receptors, what does that mean for the ranges of vitamin D? Because we can't measure the amount of receptors you've got. How do you measure? What do you do? So, well, if you've got red or yellow dots in receptors, one, you should avoid smoking and avoid air pollution and take sulforaphane. And then, if you want to imagine the receptors are like these little catcher's mitts, and then you've got vitamin D levels. So if you've got fewer catcher's mitts, it's more important you have extra vitamin D floating around so that the vitamin D always can find that precious few catcher's mitt. So if you had red or yellow dots, I would aim more at the 80 range of the 60 to 80 range. If you had green dots, I would be comfortable around the 60 range. Does that make sense? It's like we if you have less ability to use vitamin D, you want to make sure you're at the higher range of vitamin D in your blood in order to ensure those docking sites are constantly engaged with the vitamin D that's floating around. So that's the influence of vitamin D. The next slide. Okay, so then we have carb tolerance. Now, this is the carb choice test, now called the carb choice blueprint, and um, this one's really critical because your blood sugar massively influences your mood. And remember, I said that I was put on a high carb, low fat diet because my ignorant yet doctorate degreed shrink parents thought that my cholesterol was too high at age 7 and put me on the literal worst possible diet I could be on. Uh, yes, with the best of intentions, but the best of intentions has had horrible side effects. And one of the many tragic things that happened to me growing up that led me into becoming not only a functional medicine doctor but an educator because I don't want people to suffer the way that I suffered growing up because of the ignorance and at times willful blindness of my caretakers. So when people have low carb tolerance like me, you can have up to 20 copies of this gene called the AMY1 gene. This is the gene that manufactures the enzyme called amylase that breaks down. This is the first step in carbohydrate breakdown in for carbs. And if you don't have this enzyme, engaging with all the carbs that you eat, then your digestion goes sideways, causing bloating, inflammation, and dysbiosis, and all sorts of problems that I struggled with my whole life until I found out about my carb tolerance being the second lowest possible. You can have up to 20. I had a grand total of two copies. Two copies. I had the second lowest carb capacity possible. So the high carb, low fat diet was the literal worst possible diet I could be on. So the good news is that when I did my genetics test in 2016 and realized that my carb tolerance, I was even then at that point I had an all organic local farmers market diet. I was eating a Mediterranean style diet because that's what all the science said is that this is the diet. Well, it's the same. That's bell curve biochemistry. You're like, what is the most common thing for the most number of people? Well, guess what? Some people are not most people. It turns out I'm not most people in so many ways. Lucky me. And my carb tolerance test was also way over to the side of that bell curve. And so I was eating what was correct for the average population, but deeply incorrect for me personally, which is why I love genetics testing because we get to the me personal analysis of things. Like what is my the personal genetics saying, the personal combination. The good news is that within a week of changing my diet to a much lower carb, much higher protein fat diet, my digestive, mood, and energy issues leveled out. It was very, very quick. So knowing your carb choice number is really important because if you're eating too many carbs for your carb tolerance, then you're going to be a jittery mess because you've got your blood sugar spiking up and spiking down and spiking up and spiking down. And if you're eating too few carbs for your carb tolerance, then you can feel like starved. The other is that if you're eating too much fat and protein for your carb tolerance, then you can feel really sluggish and lethargic because your digestion's a lot slower than other people's. So, knowing your carb tolerance test is really, really critical to optimizing your mood. Uh, Next slide, Crystal. Okay. Uh, so we've also got um, some products that support your mood. There's the things that I recommend the most would be the top five nutrients in your genetics report. Uh, so commonly I'd see like sulforaphane, SOD inducers, omega-3s, vitamin D, antihistamine. These are the top five that most commonly show up. They're not in the same order for everyone, but these are the most common. And one reason why they're the most common is because most people who at least come to do the DNA Decoded program have struggled in some meaningful way with their health. And what I found in the over 10 years I've been analyzing genetics, most people who struggle enough to want to do their functional genetics tests, there's a reason this block of people we all share in common struggles because they have a common overlap, non-identical, but there's a lot of overlap of lots of pro-inflammatory genes, issues in their inflammatory genes, issues in their histamine genes, issues in their liver detox genes, issues in their vitamin D receptor genes, issues in their methylation genes, and issues in their free radical scavenging genes, enough that the recommendations that affect the most number of those most important genes are similar. They may not be in the same order of priority, but they are similar. So the top five things I'd recommend to help with mood are those top five things that are in your genetics blueprint. Uh, and if people need reminders, like there's things like if I personally use like a lot of Designs for Health products, and so like there's Broncho Protect for sulforaphane, mitochondrial NRG for SOD inducers, Omega Veil for omega-3s, vitamin D Avail for vitamin D, Histaese for antihistamines, and there's plenty of other companies. And for people that are, say for example, if there's any practitioners that'll be watching this, you use the products and the brands that you are familiar with and that support your client base that will also tick those boxes of sulforaphane, SOD inducers, omega-3, vitamin D, etc. Another ancillary support will be something like liposomal neurocalm, which has some nutrients in it that can support the neurotransmitter pathways. Other things would be magnesium threonate, which would be the product would be Neuromag, which would be the product Neuromag from Designs for Health. That's one of my favorites. I take that personally. Neuromag is particularly helpful for people with red and yellow dots in their COMT gene. So your COMT gene is, Crystal, what slide is the methylation gene? It's got to be somewhere in the 50s, I think.
I have
Um,
to get back to the report.
okay. Uh, it's no, sorry, it's a 67. Page 67. For people. Do you want me to show mine or do you have?
Sure, you can show yours.
Okay. All right. Uh, okay. So this is mine. So page 67, red and yellow dot here. So this is where red or yellow. This is where magnesium threonate. The product is called Neuromag, and NEUROMAG from Designs for Health, but the actual molecule is magnesium threonate. And the reason why that's important is because magnesium threonate is a form of magnesium that's small enough to get into the brain and help the enzyme, help the COMT enzyme work better, so that the emotions can you can calm down the kind of emotional load. Chris, if you can go back to the presentation, I'm actually unsure. Okay, so uh, I think we go back up one slide. Okay, great. So the other thing around mood is consistency. So consistently high quality sleep, consistent quality exercise, consistent quality strategies to navigate stress, reduce clutter, reduce exposure to stressful social media and the like. Regular meals that are consistent with your carb tolerance, and also looking at any of the different variables in your diet that may be adding to inflammation. And then the exercise as well, and then the nutrients. And the thing about all these things is consistency. Whether you're talking about supplements, exercise, sleep, or anything else, consistency is more important than doing something perfectly every occasionally is less valuable than doing something imperfectly but consistently. Uh, and next slide, Crystal. Okay, any questions? Yeah,
Have a
Crystal.
comment. I just have a comment. Some of this sounds like ADHD for some of these kids. Like lately, everybody has some kind of hyper issue or attention issue. Has this ever been looked at for kids, or like, is this something that's new that could be looked at for kids?
When he said, what is it, this you're referring to, Debbie?
Like I'm saying with for ADHD, where your attention is you can't focus. This is what this sounds like to me, where you're unable to focus, you're probably hyperactive. Would this be something like you can give them a vitamin? Like my daughter is struggling with, she's hyper, and we don't believe that. We've never seen her hyper, but she goes to therapy, and it's like, oh my God, how about if you find something that will help you and benefit you instead of sitting there complaining and giving yourself more of a reason of why you are who you are? Do you know what I mean?
I think so. So there's a lot of variables in terms of why we have the rampant increase in neurodivergent diagnoses. I myself got officially diagnosed last year with Asperger's and mild ADHD,
Mhm.
and the so there's a lot of variables, both cultural and physiological. The the physiological is the stuff we've been talking about, that when you look at modern children and also adults, you look at what is causing a lot of, visible psychological distress. And my lens is always evolutionary psychology, that humans evolved to be in outdoor tribes of 75 to 150. And when things are not living congruently with that lifestyle, then there's more mood issues. So, for example, before artificial light, we got, easily 9 to 10 hours of sleep a night because there was no light aside from a campfire to keep us up. When we walked around for, thousands and thousands and thousands of steps a day. There's an interesting article in my exercise talk that goes into the actual amount of miles that people would walk. Like it was like over 5 miles a day for one tribe that they were able to get ankle trackers on to measure the amount of miles. So so kids and adults are moving less, they're getting less sleep. The food has plenty of calories, but is deficient in nutrients. So we're getting energy, but we're not getting the adjacent nutrients to help the energy operate efficiently. Um, we're also exposed to more and more toxins than we've ever had as a species. Uh, so just the multiplicity of what's in the air, food, water, soil around us, exhaust emissions, off-gassing, we can go on and on. And the amount of stress that we're under, which is why the global recommendation is just reduce the amount of social media, which in children and especially girls is
Hmm.
particularly toxic because there's a cultural there's an inbuilt wiring of comparative of comparison because when your potential mate pool as a hunter-gatherer is only is only around, maybe 100 or so people in the course of your lifetime because you're only in this one small band of people and you meet other bands that hopefully you're not warring with occasionally, who you are compared to your other, let's be frank, competitors for the highest quality mates matters. So there's this inbuilt comparison neurological infrastructure that's been hardwired for hundreds of thousands of years of evolutionary development in these small tribes. So that's been hijacked by looking at these filtered Instagram reels or whatever. And so the depth and variety of insecurities and depression that's stimulated from staring at a screen, you combine that with the mind's negativity bias, where you look at the danger thing you look at like then you combine those two, then you also combine I'll stop. I mean, there's just so many other all these converge. You have the smartest people on the planet reaching as deep into your brainstem as possible to keep you glued as long as possible in these social media algorithms. And if you don't believe me, read Jonathan Haidt's books, all of them, particularly The Anxious Generation, which he just released. Jonathan Haidt is the single most important academic to doing and translating the research into modern language. He's the one spearheading the movements to get all phones banned from schools until they're 16 years old. And what it is, it's a collective issue that's blocking. Like if everyone does it at once, then the kids don't feel deprived because it's not like there's an in-group, out-group of phones. So, read Jonathan Haidt's work on this particular issue. It is, or listen to the interviews of him. It's quite fascinating and frankly alarming. So you've got all this multiplicity of issues that are creating all the psychological distress. Also, uh, you have the fracturing of family. There's no more real communities are now fracturing into networks and families are now living apart as well. There's a lot of more and more atomization of the population, and then on top of that, you've got the genetic influence. Some people are are more affected by these things than others genetically. And then you've got poor diet and all these other things I mentioned. Now, and that can lead to ADHD and hyperactivity. And also, like kids aren't outside as much. Ever since that first missing child showed up on the milk carton, basically kids were withdrawn from the streets as soon as this giant fear initiative was spread across the United States. Now, some children did go missing, but there is also some meaningful speculation that once that the trend was not necessarily started by uh, the people who were trying to sell advertisements on television, but certainly was encouraged and continued because the more children were kept from being outside, the more television they watched. So if you kept the fear offensive going, then you kept children inside glued to screens, and therefore you could sell more crap. So that is a speculation that I personally believe, but it is speculation. So that's all the externalities plus genetics, and then unfortunately, Debbie, there's another phenomenon of the explosion of diagnoses where I literally listened to a podcast this morning about how over 40% of Stanford are diagnosed with psychological d disabilities like ADHD and so on. Now, I personally know what a real psychological disability is in the sense that, I mean, I don't call it a disability. I call it a mixture of a superpower and kryptonite. It's like I have Asperger's syndrome. I made a comedy show about it. You have to know a lot to do a 60-minute comedy show well. I basically have an entire bachelor's degree just in Asperger's in order to generate the content to make a comedy show. I don't like to call it disability because I don't feel disabled. I feel like I have some superpowers and I have some kryptonites. The kryptonites do feel disabling, but I don't feel disabled. But what happens is that there is a perverse incentive that I saw in high school in the 90s where parents were intentionally getting their kids diagnosed with ADHD or similar just to milk the system so that they could have untimed SAT tests. So that in college, if you have a disability, you can apply to now get your own private dorm room. So there's people out there that are abusing the system because they get goodies by leeching off of a very well-intended system to to support people who need the help. Additionally, the uh, the um, the people who in the school systems who are employed uh, by navigating by helping people and enable these kind of psychological disabled students, they get more money for their department and they get more power and credibility the more people they diagnose. So they may not even be aware of that's what's happening, but there is a perverse incentive for there to be more and more and more diagnoses because the people who make the diagnoses goodies uh, uh, get goodies by the more and more diagnoses they hand out. It's no different than the pharmaceutical industries shifting the goalpost on what blood pressure counts as high blood pressure, because then you can sell more drugs. They're just shifting the goalpost of what they now call or diabetes. You know what they now call 120 over 80? They don't call that normal anymore. They now call it, and this is real, pre-diabetic. Do you see the hypnosis game they're playing? Pre-diabetic. So it's a bit of a semantic shell game that is other people are taking advantage of.
Dr.
So
Sam, it looks like not Nicole has her hand raised.
yes, I see that. No, Nicole.
So on my report, some of the things that you covered, there's gray circles because I think I did this so long ago.
Mhm.
So, uh, what would I have to do would I have to retest the whole thing?
You have to redo this. So what Nicole's talking about is that the people who did their test prior to, I believe, April of 21, I believe that's the cutoff date, may be missing some of these genes, like in the MAOA, and possibly exercise and some others. And that's simply because the gene the chip that was doing the analysis didn't have those genes available to be tested. So to redo them, you would have to redo the swab because we just need the data. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Uh, Debbie, did that answer your question?
It did answer my question, and but it also brings up even more because it's like you have to be your own adversary in everything that you do. You can't
Advocate, I think is what she meant to
advocate.
say.
Sorry. You have to be because you get sucked into all this stuff so easily. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
this is why we have calls like this. This is why I designed the report the way I did, so that the tools are empowering. And they're also prioritized because it can be overwhelming to try to do all of the things. That's why slide 6 has like diet, supplements, exercise, start there. Hydration, start there. Just start with that page and just work down that list at whatever pace you need to. And I was asked this question on the podcast this week. I think it was Monday. What where do I start? Even though even let's say you're on page 6, Crystal, if you can just pop up a sample page 6. Um, if you were to pick from like diet, supplements, exercise, hydration, and so which one do I do first? Because even that, there's like a bunch of things that can be done. And the answer is whatever is easiest to do and sustain. Start with the easiest thing to do and sustain first, because then because the recommendations are the highest priority, you know what you're doing is going to be really helpful. And if you get a micro win, and then that also shifts how you feel, then you will be even more enthused to do the next thing and then the next thing, and it'll just build on itself. And uh, yeah, just the one page summary. Perfect.
I have a question.
Yes.
So if you start doing the recommendation, doing this easiest, do you think it'll make as big of an impact on how you feel to keep it going? Like for me, I feel overwhelmed and it's hard for me to start.
hmm
So I almost feel like even if it's harder to do something more drastic, if I see the change, then I'll be able to do all the other steps that I need to take.
So the reality is, Andrea, because this is designed as a group program, I don't know your specific situation. I'm not asking for it. Is like, are there things that some people could do that would have a higher impact than others? Sure. For example, if I'm a red dot in caffeine, which I am, and I got this report and I was still drinking coffee, that's likely one of the most impactful things I can do to change my mood is to get off the coffee.
Okay.
But if someone's a red or yellow dot and they're not drinking caffeine anyway, then or they are drinking like some green tea like every other day, that's not going to necessarily have a big impact, even though technically it is part of the list.
Okay.
So this is in general, when people see their list and like low no caffeine, low no alcohol, unless they're completely self-deluded, like my mom's third husband was around his relationship with alcohol, people know they drink too much alcohol.
Right, right.
So, and when you look at, most people psychologically have this big barrier to the low histamine elimination diet because it seems very difficult.
Yeah.
And my response is like, unless you're having like very clear, debilitating high histamine symptoms, like then pick something else to start with and just build momentum elsewhere.
Okay. I have another question.
hmm
Do you see variants in particular genes that correlate with autism? Like, is there a particular gene that you see a variant in, or a red or a yellow dot?
it's not a particular one. It's clusters. So actually, when I lectured at the American Academy of Therapeutic Humor as a keynote back in May of last year, I did a breakout session where I talked about the genetics of autism. And this is a very enthusiastic debate in the community, and some people are deeply concerned about even having the debate simply because of the dark history of Asperger's being developed in the Nazi era and the specter of eugenics. Um, I looked at it strictly from the health genes perspective, not any other types of genes. And there are known patterns, like the COMT gene having a variation, the VDR genes, some of the inflammatory genes like interleukin 6 and TNF alpha. By the way, I have these as variations, and um, and some other genes that are also involved that you'd find in the Fit Genes genetic blueprint. But those ones are like the CBS gene, which is part of the methylation pathway.
Okay.
There are clusters of genes that we do see in the health arena that do overlap, and so It's one of the reasons I think that people on the spectrum are also much more sickly physically than others, is because those genes that are very, very important, like VDRs, interleukin 6, TNF alpha, like those are in like the top 10 most influential genes when it comes to health, period. So when you see clusters of those genes all clustered together around people with autism, of course it would make sense to me that we as a population are more sickly than the other normative population.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, I think we're at time. Is there any other burning questions? Okay. All right. If people can put in the chat what they found most interesting and helpful. I would love to see just like a one sentence thing of what you found most valuable on this call. Vitamin D. Okay, seeing the reports as I talked about them. Sleep. Okay. All right. Uh, Thank you all so much, and I will see you all next month. Thank you,
Okay,
Crystal.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.